And Dave Sussman back with you, Ricochet.com, Whiskey Politics Network, and we're really privileged to be sitting today with David Horowitz. David Horowitz is the founder of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, author of several books. You've probably read many of them, including the most recent, The Big Agenda. Thanks for joining us, David. Appreciate it. Before we discuss California, Trump, political correctness, for those that don't know, and I'm sure most of our listeners do, for those that don't know, you were 30, 40 years ago a former radical. You came out of the closet, so to speak, in the 80s when you told everybody that you were going to be voting for Ronald Reagan, and you have been taking nothing but daggers and hits for the past 30 to 40 years since that point. My question for you is, we're here today at this convention basically talking to conservative activists about how to save California, but from a broader scale, what can the right learn from the left, especially when it comes to grassroots? And you talk about fighting fire with fire.
Yes. Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a game plan until you punch them in the mouth. And the Democrats have a big punch in that they call all Republicans deplorables, racists. In particular, racism is it, but also sexists, Islamophobes, the Hillary Clinton line. If you're in a debate with somebody and they're pretending to champion victims of racism and they're accusing you of being a racist, you've already lost the argument. Republicans and conservatives think that politics is about policies, and ultimately it is, but the political battle is not fought over policy. If it were, there would be no gun control advocates, would there? What it's fought over is emotional issues like racism. So in order to fight this, to fight fire with fire, you have to stick it to them first. It's something that Marlon Brando taught me years ago on the waterfront. You do it to them before they do it to you. The Democratic Party is a racist party. It controls every inner city of size in America and has 100%. There are no Republicans in sight, say, in the Detroit City Council. But 100%, and they have for 50 to 100 years. So every injustice in the inner cities, all the killing fields, Democrats are responsible for. And if it were Republicans who were in charge of them, the Democrats would be calling Republicans racist. As it is, they call them racist without any basis or evidence. So that's my advice. Fight fire with fire.
Now, they refer to racism, and you say that there is, in your mind, no institutional or systemic racism. There's a few bigots out there, right? But
it's outlawed. The Civil Rights Act said you can't discriminate by race. So if there's institutional racism, why aren't there suits all over the place of whoever is guilty of institutional, or whatever institution is guilty of institutional racism? There are no such suits because it doesn't exist.
Right.
Or, if there's 10 suits or something, it's an insignificant issue.
So they use emotion.
If there's institutional racism, it's called affirmative action. That's institutional racism.
So it's reverse racism.
I don't even like to call it reverse. It's racism.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple.
And they stand up and they say that we're for the oppressed. I'm referring to the left, the Democrats, the progressives, when you, in fact, call them the oppressors themselves.
Yeah. Look, one of the worst things that's been done has been done to students who graduate. They go to college. First of all, they learn nonsense like women's studies, which says that gender is socially constructed, is invented in essence, which contradicts everything that you're taught in neuroscience or biology. Like, you have all these kids who graduate with $100,000 in debt. How did that happen? Mm-hmm. It happened because the Democrats passed the Pell Grants. So the government guarantees student loans. So the college administrators say, they have guaranteed loans, we can raise the tuition. So the tuition is outrageous these days. And that's the reason. So the Democrats are, if you look behind most of that's a real oppression of students. You'll find the Democrats are behind them. Just the way they run all the inner city schools that don't teach the kids. They will not hold teachers to account because the teacher unions are the most powerful constituency in the Democratic Party and so forth.
So you've had decades of this, though. I mean, going back, you were a radical in the 60s and the 70s, and you were involved, I think, with the Black Panther Party. This is institutional from the standpoint of the radicals. Today we see Antifa. It all stems from Marxist methodologies and philosophies, Frankfurt School. But you talk about today, and I've seen you do several speeches, and I've read some of your work. You talk today about a new civil war, right? Now, obviously, we don't have uniforms and we don't have sides.
No. It can't be a civil war. The Civil War, I'll explain that in a second, but it can't be like the first Civil War because the federal government is too powerful, so there isn't going to be a war. The war is a political war over control of the federal government. And why is there a civil war? Because the Democratic Party is a racist party. Identity politics is racism. It's to judge people first on their race, their ethnicity, their gender, and so forth. And what you obliterate then is the individual and their accountability. And then you see it in the Democratic Party platform. It says, I don't know if this is even a true statistic, but that Hispanic and Black Americans' income is a tenth that of white Americans. As though, first of all, white Americans are responsible for that. But what it does, it's categorized everybody by color. It doesn't take into account how many of the Hispanics don't speak English. If you don't speak English, you're not going to get a terrific job and make a lot of money. How many of the kids are born out of wedlock? Even Barack Obama concedes that if you are a child, regardless of your race, and you're raised in a single female-headed household, you are 5 times more likely to be poor. So that's the problem. But it's not. But the Democratic Party is presenting it as a problem of white racism, and now they talk about white supremacy, which is ludicrous. How stupid is that? We had 8 years of a black president who was elected with 56% of his support came from whites. Name me one black country in the world that's elected a white president. Name me one Asian country that has. I mean, this is a great country with tremendous opportunity. 2 attorney generals, national security of all black, 10,000 black elected officials. Every time there was a shooting in the year of, when there was this war on police, the chief of police was black. So they're racists, and they're anti-white racists, so that makes it okay, I guess, from their point of view. But we have to fight that.
And what does a civil war then look like?
Well, the civil war is because you can't have a nation half slave and half free. You can't have a nation half believing in individual freedom and individual accountability and half believing in collectivism based on race. You can't have a racist, it's going to either be a racist America, which is what the Democratic Party is pushing, or it's going to be a free America based on individually. You take a person on their merits. That's been a 200-year fight in this country. It looked like it was achieved with the passage of the Civil Rights Acts in the 60s, but the Democratic Party has spent the last 50 or so years reversing that, undoing it.
We were just chatting before you sat down for this interview, and you were saying that you are moving. You're leaving California.
I don't want to say where I'm moving on camera.
Okay. We won't be telling anybody where you're moving to. But you are leaving California. A lot of people are leaving California.
Yeah, there's an exodus. Let's just treat it that way. Forget me.
Yeah.
An exodus from California because it's been run for 50 or 60
So
years
let's talk about
by
California.
a left-wing party.
Right, and you refer to the politics of this state. Now we're dealing with a sanctuary state, which is dangerous. It's dangerous for the state. It's dangerous for the country.
No, and conservatives, typically of conservatives, they just want to be rid of all the problems.
Okay.
So they say, they hope California secedes. I hope that if California secedes, Washington will go to war with California and subdue it and put all its leaders in jail.
And we're starting to see lawsuits been filed by Jeff Sessions. And
we finally have a fighting crew.
Mm-hmm. So what happens with California? What does that fight look like from your perspective?
Well, it's a seditious state, and it's a communist state. And people are suffering. And, of course, they're all corrupt. They want to build bullet rails for billions of dollars because they can line the pockets of their cronies and themselves. And they hate the individual freedom that cars represent. So there's a war on the automobile in California.
Okay. So, without the Trump administration focusing and aggressively focusing now on sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, and we see the situation with the mayor of Oakland, for example.
She should be in jail.
Tipped off, the criminals up and the illegal aliens up in the Oakland Bay area, that ICE was coming.
Well,
right?
they've conducted a war on language.
Right.
Undocumented. What, they lost their documents? No, they didn't lose their documents. They've invaded our country is what they are. They're invaders. That's the correct. It was, I believe it was Confucius who said maybe it was Lao Tzu. In order to establish justice, you have to first rectify the names. You have to call things by what they are.
Right.
So when you see this abuse of language, undocumented, or people of color, which isn't even in English, it's not grammatical. We don't say, here's a box of crayons of color. It's an ideological term, and it has one purpose and one purpose only: to declare white people evil. The whole world is people of color, and according to their theory, they're all oppressed. Guess who the bad guys are? They're white people. The fact of the matter is, people of color is a meaningless term. There is no group, people of color, that has a unity of interest that's marginalized and oppressed. If you think there is, tell that to the Rwandans, where the people of color Hutus massacred 1 million people of color Tutsis. Mm-hmm. So the Hutus are the oppressors. They're people of color. Maharajas in India are people of color. Beheaders, ISIS beheaders are people of color. It has no meaning except white people are evil.
So it's about the language.
And then everybody uses it. Yeah, conservatives, they collude in this language. We call them social justice warriors. What they are is social justice fascists. They want to shut everybody else down. They want to impose their idea of what's just on everybody else.
Is there a movement right now? We see it with other folks besides yourself, the Jordan Petersons of the world, that talk about the language and that talk about the free speech.
There is this.
Are you feeling optimistic by what you're seeing from that side?
I think Dave Rubin is another one.
Yes.
Candace Owens. There is a, when I came out of the left, we called ourselves the Second Thoughts movement. So there was a Second Thoughts movement after 9/11, and there's another one today, and hopefully it'll have an impact.
Second thoughts meaning what? What's the definition of that?
Well, second thoughts about being a leftist and believing in all this nonsense.
Okay,
I see it. Andrew Sullivan wrote a really terrific piece in New York Magazine about how the left is a threat to individual freedom. That's the banner. It should be the banner of the Republican Party. Republicans, they talk like accountants all the time. And it's always about policies, which people, they defer to their elected officials. They vote for people who they think care about them. but Republicans, they fight Obamacare, it costs too much. That's not the way to fight it. It's the greatest attack on individual freedom in our lifetimes. You can't have the government having all your information and controlling your health care. You don't have a free society if that happens.
Right.
But I didn't. The only Republican who fought it that way was Rand Paul.
Last question for you, and we greatly appreciate you taking the time. And normally we do long-form interviews much longer than this, so a lot of these issues I'd love to get into deeper with you down the road. But my last question for you is, you've been famous for speaking at a lot of colleges around America, and you've taken a lot of hits at those colleges. Are you still speaking at colleges?
Yeah,
you are.
What are you seeing next week?
What are you seeing right now as far as the
They've destroyed. The left has destroyed one of the great institutions of Western civilization. Which is the liberal arts college, which really took 100 years to develop. These are no longer, these are just indoctrination centers for Marxists and communists. And I've been on 400 campuses. When I go to campus, as I just spoke at the University of Houston, I had all these, they were mainly Muslims, chanting, Zionists off our campus, Horowitz off our campus.
Anti-Semitism.
They're Jew
Blatant.
They're Jew haters. They're terrorist supporters. But the fact is, they're coddled and protected by the university administration. So there's no free speech on our college campus. Of course, free speech. If people agree with you, you don't need a right to free speech. You need the right if they disagree with you. And there is no right to disagree on college campuses. You get punished if you do. It's a terrible thing that's happened. That the University of California just issued an edict that if you're white and you say you're not racist, that's racism. These are totalitarians.
David Horowitz, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. Folks, you can find his book out there, The Big Agenda, and look forward to speaking with you down the road.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
All right.